All right, everyone, welcome to our Friday webinar series on this day, April 11th, 2025. And we are welcoming two friends and near or far colleagues of ours, Dr. Roger Purnell and Dr. Jarrell Hill, who will be speaking today on Black and African American community college transfer success. They've got a lot of really great research and wisdom to share with us today. But before we do that, we'll do just a few types of spring cleaning, if you will. We'll go over some of our April events, share with you our spring calendar, and then we will hand it over to Roger and Jarrell. Many thanks to our advisory coaches. We couldn't do this without you, and to our program team. You can see all of our names listed here. And if you are in the room right now, any of you, thank you, and say hi in the chat when you get a chance. All right, our spring calendar right here. As always, you can use the QR code if you don't already have it handy. Our next webinar is on May 9th. And we will be inviting previous OFAR participants to share their action plans in Open Pedagogy in Action. May 30th, your final reflection is due in Canvas, and June 13th is the final team showcase. And I will be sharing with you some resources for that in just a moment. All right, so team showcases, if your coaches have not discussed it with you yet, they surely will be doing that very shortly. You can go ahead and scan this QR code, and this will take you to kind of a repository folder of information for the team showcases, which will take place on June 13th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. It is an invite-only event. So we encourage you to invite your sponsoring administrator. Within this folder, you'll find an invitation for the event. And last month, we had a great webinar with Kathy Esmiller talking about some of the issues that are up today around DEI and equity. Your college logos are on the invitation. If you have thoughts or feelings about that, please let me know in an email if you would feel like you would like your logo taken off for any reason. It's certainly something that we can talk about. And on more of a positive note, the online teaching conference is coming up June 16th through 18th in Long Beach, California. OFAR, for the first time in a while, will not be presenting, but James will be there. I think maybe Joy will be there. But what we will be doing is our annual OFAR dinner. If you would like to sign up for the dinner, please scan the QR code and just put your name and contact information out. And a few weeks before the dinner, we will be in touch with details in regard to a time and a location, which is yet to be determined. And if you need OER support for your action plans or your team showcases, please contact oer@canyons.edu. And you can set up some time for individual or team consulting. You know this by now, but if you need to miss a webinar, please let your coach and team leader know in advance. I send out the webinar recording fairly soon, no later than 48 hours. It's Friday, so you'll usually get it to your inbox by Monday. And then visit the required webinar makeup discussion area in Canvas to verify that you have indeed viewed the webinar. And this was shared in the chat, but it's here again in case you came into the Zoom room just a couple minutes after I shared the link. You can scan this and you can leave any questions, comments, resources, thoughts on this Google Doc, which will be shared out at the end of the webinar. You can also leave it in the chat, but it's nice to have kind of a little bit more of a permanent record of dialogue.
Okay, so I am so happy to introduce two incredibly wise and strong leaders in our higher education system here in California. Boy, Dr. Roger Purnell, she's president and CEO of RDP Consulting. She brings 30 years of professional experience as a program director, grant maker, researcher, facilitator, and so much more. She has designed, led, and consulted on numerous high-profile studies and projects, and she's going to talk about one of those today. And you can see from her biography, she's done much, much more across higher education, particularly in California. So we're so glad that she's gifting us or giving us some of her time and wisdom today. And next slide, please. Bill, likewise, an incredible leader in higher education. He is Dean of Counseling and Guided Pathways at Los Angeles City College. I'm so glad that he's part of the community college system. He was previously with Pacific Oaks College, where he was the first African-American male to serve as Dean of the School of Education. Of course, he has deep, deep experience in DEI, student motivation, educational administration, teacher education, and on and on and on. And yeah, both Dr. Purnell and Dr. Hill have been strong supporters of OFAR, and we're really grateful for that. And we're so grateful for both of them to gift us with some of their wisdom today. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Purnell to start us off.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me again. I'm really excited to be part of a magic hour. I didn't know that was what this was, but I appreciate it. And what I'll do today is tell you about a study I was fortunate to consult on with the RP group looking at Black student transfer. Next slide. So the RP group, for those who may not know, is the research and planning group for California community colleges. It's a nonpartisan nonprofit, has its roots as a membership organization for institutional research planning and assessment professionals. It really uses data and evidence to drive equity at the community college system. They do planning, evaluations. If you've been to the Strengthening Student Success Conference, they're a sponsor, just to give you a sense of what the organization is all about. And if you're not part of their listserv, you want to do that and to receive their weekly super brief, just to keep up to date on what's happening in the system. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about the Through the Gate study, and then a follow-up study called the African American Transfer Tipping Point Project. So the RP group decided, let's look at the transfer landscape across California community colleges. And so they looked at course taking pattern, and I'm going to tell you about the different steps along this pathway. So there in yellow, you have the transfer achievers. So those are the students that plan to transfer and successfully did so. And then in the bottom left there, the kind of magenta color, those are transfer explorers. So those are students that, based on their course taking history, they've completed 12 to 44 transferable units within 6 years of their first time enrollment, but they had not transferred. If we go over to the violet color there, the momentum students, again, they're demonstrating that, yes, they're working towards transfer. They've completed 45 to 59 transferable units. They maintained a 2.0 GPA, but they have not yet transferred. Now, the students that are in the darker purple, the near the gate students, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about the near the gate students. So try to remember this for me. These are students that have earned 60 or more transferable units and have maintained a 2.0 GPA, but they're missing transfer level English and or math and have not yet transferred. Then in the green, you have students that are at the gate. They have that associate's degree for transfer, or they completed the requirements for transfer. So 60 plus units, a 2.0 GPA, transfer level English and math, and yet they have not transferred. So I'm going to talk a lot about the near the gate students. So hold that definition for me. And what they found is that when they compared the Black students, and I'll use Black students instead of African American just for brevity's sake, when they compared Black students to white students, Black students were over 2 times more likely to transfer than remain near the gate. So if they got to the near the gate point along this transfer journey, they were more likely to make it through the gate than white students. So next slide. So the RP group said, let's explore this more. We're really curious about this. So this led to this African American Transfer Tipping Point project. Next slide. So there were two guiding questions. The first is, what's contributing to this likelihood of getting to that tipping point, that near the gate for students? And what are some of the practices and programs that are helping students get to that point and ultimately transfer? So those were the two guiding questions. So there's 3 phases to the work. The first was exploring the students' course taking patterns. The second was a series of interviews and focus groups with both administrators and students at colleges that had higher than normal transfer success with African American students. And then the third phase was a survey of Black students from across the California community college system. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about these. So the phase 1 population looked at 6 first-time cohorts. These are the years that we looked at, so 2011 through 2016, over a 6-year period. They had completed at least 12 transferable units with passing grades and had not made that transfer step yet. And then we had about almost 70,000 Black students and quite a few non-Black students for the comparison. Okay, so this is a little blurry, but let me describe what's here. So what I'm going to tell you about, what I'm comparing is Black students that have these characteristics or have participated in these activities or met these milestones to a group of Black students who have not taken advantage of these activities, have not met these milestones. So it's comparing Black students to Black students. I just want to make that clear. So what we found, and this is looking at the likelihood that they get to at least the near the gate point along the transfer journey, right? That dark purple point in the journey. So students that this transfer level English and math in the first year were 210% more likely to get to that near the gate point, right? If students passed transfer level math, but not English in the first year, they were 160% more likely to make it to that near gate point. Now, I'm not a betting person, but I might be headed to Vegas if I knew these were the odds of winning, so to speak. And then transfer level English, but not math in the first year, they were 70% more likely, again, than Black students that did not complete transfer level English in the first year to get to the near the gate status. If they received academic counseling, they were 60% more likely to get at least near the transfer gate. If they participated in MOJA, 20% more likely. Now, if students were low income, they were 20% less likely to get to that near the gate point. If they were involved in DSPS, again, 20% less likely. And then if they were put on probation, they were 70% less likely to make it to the near the gate status. So we were also curious, well, how does this relate to other groups? So when we looked at academic counseling for non-Black students, they were 110% more likely to get to the near the gate status if they had received academic counseling. And so that raised a question, well, why is there such a difference for Black students and non-Black students for this activity, given that we know counseling is often associated with completion? So we wanted to explore that. And the other piece that stood out for us is that 41% of Black students were put on probation versus 29% of non-Black students. So this probation could have a different level, a different impact, more negative impact on Black students. So that was another piece that we wanted to explore more. Next. So the second phase of this study involved the interviews with administrators and students from a group of colleges that had fairly high Black transfer rates. What we found was that passing math and English was really, really important to students. And students often talked about how the teacher, their instructor, helped them feel confident help them feel like they wanted them to be successful, and help them learn the skills that they were going to need over time as a college student in these courses. So that came up over and over again, where students would mention a faculty person by name and said, this person did this. I had a relationship with this person that was helpful, or they pulled me aside and said, this is how you do this, or let me help you with this, right? The other piece was academic counseling, and this was interesting. We found that students generally said, I don't go to general counseling. I don't go to the transfer center. I feel like the people there are not representative of me. I have to explain myself over and over again. I just don't feel like I'm valued or seen or heard when I take advantage of these services. The other that was really critical, the other kind of key resource the students mentioned was Emoja. They talked about having a dedicated counselor who kind of knew their story, understood where they were coming from, often were reflective of their own backgrounds, and that really worked to build a relationship with them. And they mentioned that many times as being really critical to their transfer success. And then the other kind of key theme was around academic probation. The word itself, in its relationship to the criminal justice system, was really triggering for many students. And so, as one student shared, I really felt they had given up on me when I got that letter that I was on probation. And now I no longer have access to financial aid. So, what am I going to do? Interestingly, the administrators often saw this academic probation period as a chance to kind of come in and help students, whereas students were seeing it as just the opposite. Next slide. So we also did, and one other thing I want to mention on the other slide, just quickly around transfer level math. If we can get students through transfer level math in their first year, and you don't have to, yeah, that's fine. Transfer level math seems to be the really sticky wicket for many of the students trying to get to that near the gate point. And probably no one's surprised by that, but just wanted to make that point. So let me talk about phase 3 of the study, and that's the survey. And so we asked students to really comment on on a number of things, whether they were having mental health struggles, if they were continuing to deal with things that came out of the pandemic, if they couldn't get past that transfer level math or English course, if they had housing or food insecurity, things like this, to find out what might be going on for them. And when we looked at students who were currently on academic probation versus those had never been on academic probation, what you can see here is that students who are on academic probation were more likely to report challenges with a number of these items here relating to affordability, work-life balance, navigating a pathway at the college, and finding a support network. Not surprising. The survey also asked students about whether they had experienced microaggressions. And I'll give you an example of, you have your hand raised and you're not called on. Or you come into the class and people are like, are you sure you're supposed to be in Calc 1? Are you in the right class? This is what I mean by microaggressions. And what we found that experiencing microaggressions really seemed to have be associated for students with not passing transfer level math the first time they tried to complete the course. We didn't see that same kind of effect when it came to transfer level English. So really trying to understand what's happening in the classroom for Black students and trying to address that could be really critical in the successful completion of transfer level math, which again we know is a critical kind of barrier for many students to make it to that near the transfer gate point. So those are the slides. To find out more about their project, there's a number of reports. You can scan this code or just go to rpgroup.org and put in African American Transfer Tipping Point project, and you can access all the data and information there.
Thanks, Roger. I think we have a couple of minutes if people would like to ask a few questions before we move on to the next phase with Dr. Hill. Anybody? Okay, all right. So why don't we charge right ahead? And Jarrell, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Lunch and Learn session. Thank you, Dr. Purnell. I just so appreciate your thorough research, and I really do hope that I'm able to implement that in my new role. I think there's a lot of value in making a sense of belonging beyond enrollment. As you go to the next slide, you'll kind of see how we'll use our time with understanding the culture and climate, what the best college teachers do. We'll look at some of our goals and strategy around how to actually make this report a reality for us in the space to try to support students with their transfer goals, whether to transfer onto university or to seek gainful employment because the learning that they've encountered got them connected to a specific career. The next slide is where we kind of summarize the other pieces of the puzzle, so to speak, in terms of the culture, culturally relevant practices, the debt that's owed to students, and most importantly, making sure that we have the right fit, right? Sometimes people are looking at the best school, but oftentimes the perception is that may be the best school, but it may not be the right fit. On the next slide, we'll kind of get into the introduction, and I was, taken away by the grace and disruption. And I love this beautiful quote from an anonymous source: the beautiful mess of broken dreams often lead to the most profound discoveries. It really reminds me of the Japanese art form kintsugi, where they take the broken pieces and they embrace the imperfections. And what they do is they put the artwork back together and they line it with silver and gold. They don't hide the damages, they actually elevate the damages and make it a masterpiece. So oftentimes when I hear, you'll see some of the data and the challenges on the next slide as we advance through. Oftentimes I hear the current challenges. I want to apply that same kind of concept around this kintsugi, the beautiful scars of students that aren't quite making it yet. They are on they're on the other side of their struggle. And often most of us in higher education, we are 30 to 40 years away from being in that struggle. So sometimes we can forget what it's like. This number, I think we have to make sure the data makes sense. There's over 500,000 students who have stopped enrolling based on this 10-year frame. To give you more of a perspective, that's like taking the city of Kansas City and taking it completely off the map. There's no more Kansas City, no more Mahomes, and the Swifties and all those things are gone. That's the amount of students that are not enrolling in school. So if we want to have impact to the data, that's what's really happening to our students. So as we know in previous pandemics, students started to go to school to upskill, to get out of their economic troubles. What's happening is it's going in reverse. That means schools are putting up a wall saying that they do not belong here. And that's not my opinion, that's based on the data. Clearly, there's something there that's keeping them away from going to school. And in the next slide, where we talk about financial barriers and how caring is crucial. Students don't care what you know until they know that you care. It's something I was told from my high school teacher that's near and dear to my heart, who's since passed away. But these are some of the things that Ken Bain elevates in his work. I think what really stuck me was, and I shared this with my old faculty, the bulimic learning is almost like a bulimia. It's a disease. Sometimes students are so afraid to go in classrooms because they feel like they don't belong there, and oftentimes their knowledge isn't valued. So what happens with that kind of feeling is they tend to turn away. We need to figure out, are we asking these deeper questions? Is the material worth learning? Oftentimes I notice from the data just in my new position, I've seen students do really well in performing arts, they're actually trending in the right direction. We know that students of color love arts and music and entertainment. So clearly that course of study has a correlation to their academic success. On the next slide, we'll get into it a little bit deeper with the strengths and weaknesses. We know that the consciousness around knowing your subject matter is really, really important, but also understanding that there are more, we have to, the weakness is we have to look deeper at what intelligence is. Students display intelligence in a different way. Our students need more than grit, right? They need a level playing field and clear rules. Grit is not, that's only one area of it, right? Oftentimes kids from underserved communities have more resilience and grit than most of us who are living in a really comfortable situation. So they don't necessarily need that lesson in resilience, right? Oftentimes we see this centering low expectations. Oh, a kid of color who is, below grade level, they got the empathy C. You passed the class, right? That sympathy bias is something we have to be more reflective about in terms of how we're approaching students and holding them to our expectations. Scholars like Judith Kleinfeld and Gloria Lansing Billings, they use this term called warm demander. That means there's some value in somebody holding you to high expectations because they see more in you than you see in yourself. I am a product of that. I've had teachers, I had no idea I would be a dean in a college. I'm like, I didn't even know that existed when I was a kid. So clearly I'm a product of good mentorship. And I do remember the people who believed in me. So if I could elevate this community, that's something that you definitely need to center. The students they will remember the people who believed in them, right? It just reminds me of what Dr. King says, and oftentimes people just quote the "I have a dream" speech, but he said, in the end, you remember not the words of your enemies, but the silence of your friends. So oftentimes we get in this kind of thing where people know it's right, but they're afraid to use their voice. The biggest thing that can be stolen away from you is your voice, right? I remember hearing Marcus Garvey once, and he said, the pen is more powerful than the sword, but the tongue is more powerful than both of them put together. So again, the most important thing is your voice. So on the next slide, we kind of get into seeing what the goals are. Now we can kind of land like, well, we see what the best college teachers do. We have the research from Dr. Purnell's group. Now, how do we synthesize this work into some action items? One very simple thing here is making sure that we have a seamless credit transfer. All the courses should be accredited and count towards their degree. Also, we have to think about making sure that we have time to degree is so important. When I hear 18 weeks and 16 weeks, there is a disconnect with Black students. Oftentimes, they're not attending community college until age 28. There's a 10-year gap in them attending college. That time to degree is so important. So making sure every course they take in the community college system is meaningful. And then equitable outcomes. I am so big on the grade point trajectory instead of looking at your cumulative GPA. I like to see students start off at a really low level and then ultimately increase. I think we have to figure out ways to really celebrate those data points instead of some of the ones that we're always told that students aren't graduating, but it's not where you start. It's different if you start life off at third base. I mean, some people aren't even in the ballpark yet. So those are totally different outcomes, and we have to be really honest about how we're collecting that data and what is that data really saying to us. Next slide, please. Student agency is so important, but this is a part of accountability. Student agency isn't just doing what you want to, it's doing what you need to do also. So oftentimes when we talk about your pain, oftentimes your pain will push you and your purpose kind of pulls you. So when I look at student agency, this is something where your ownership, there is an ownership disease because people are afraid to admit what they don't know. So oftentimes students are saying it's someone else's fault, or likewise, sometimes educators, the system doesn't allow me to do what I need to do. And that's an honest assessment to some degree. But at the same time, when we want to center agency, we're co-creators in learning, right? We have to see that oftentimes students know more about classrooms than we do because they're in it now, right? We haven't been in classrooms in, some of us in quite some time. I really do like the goal setting and assertiveness and taking initiative. Those are things that counselors really have to center when they're meeting with students in their ed plan. So this is your part. Your educators are going to do this part. We have to make sure that we need to center their part, right? That's the reality pedagogy. Let me understand what your issues are, and then let's come up with some solutions. I don't want to weaponize what I learned and turn it against you, right? Oftentimes broken systems tell people they're broken so that they don't have to change. And if I can be honest here, that's what happens oftentimes. It's like, well, if I know there's a barrier, I want to be open and acknowledge that with the students. So on the next slide, we can go a little bit deeper into, oh, yikes. Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but basically we're looking, go
I
ahead.
could actually pull up your original slideshow if you want me to jump out of this.
No, it's okay. I don't want to stop. I think we can go in. This is more of centering the belonging, right? It reminds me of when we think about, and it's highlighted in Dr. Purnell's report, we need to support programs like Umoja because they are really student-centered, and we have to put the resources behind it, right? When we talk about building a sense of community and belonging, that's representation. It's not enough just to look like the students outwardly, but inwardly, you have to understand their experiences. The more that we build on our relational approach, it's relationship before rigor. When we can understand their shared experiences, it will elevate our relationships. Next slide, please.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, we may have to switch.
yeah, let's
Great.
switch.
Okay, you want to swap out? I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Sorry about that, everyone. Sometimes these things don't work out the
But
way.
I can take questions as we pause. I know I was dumping a lot while we're shifting PowerPoints. Are there any questions? I'd love to hear from you all. Like I said, this could be interactive as people are having Mountain Dew and coffee and tea from the chat.
A question that I might pose, I'll pose now, but maybe both you and Dr. Purnell can address it later. And that's the question of short-term classes. And, we're talking, you were referencing time to degree, and boy, yeah, we've got 16 weeks, 17 week, 18 week terms. I'm just wondering if there's evidence that shorter term classes have any particular impact on Black and African American students, or disproportionately impact populations of students generally. So I'll leave that to you to address whenever it fits into the conversation.
In my opinion, and again, at the 4-year, I know from my experience that short-term courses did make students feel like there was a sense of accomplishment and moving towards their goals. I know in teacher preparation, the classes are 8 weeks. So every 8 weeks, they're going into the next course. And there's student agency and autonomy into that kind of course selection, because they're like, well, I can get done within 18 months. So I do love the idea, but at the same time, I know students learn in different ways and different days. So some students do need a more lengthy semester due to their time out of school. If your average age student, like it is here at City, it's 36 years old, and I came from that same kind of environment. Oftentimes students who are reintroducing themselves into the academic spaces need a little bit more time to get adjusted to the courses. So an 8-week course could definitely destroy their confidence if they haven't been in school for many years. So I would say, to answer your question, is both and. I think we have both models, but we're not finished yet. I think that's the kintsugi, right? Like, we need to still take those beautiful scars and make other modalities where it's hybrid, it's online, it's a more collaborative, it's a weekend intensive. What works for the students, right? If we're student-centered, we actually have to have plans that show that we're being student-centered. I don't know if Dr. Purnell wants to add to it. I know our report touches on the different parts of the course structure.
Yeah, I think just from experience, students shared that there's certain classes that work well in the 8-week schedule. Math is not one of them. And some of the science courses are not. And whether they're online, I think hybrid models seem to be preferred for many of the classes for certain students, and then in person for math, I would say definitely is kind of what students shared with me.
Other questions before we
I think
send the introduction?
yeah, John has a,
Oh,
John,
sorry.
question from Hartnell. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, and thank you, Dr. Purnell. I really appreciate your time and really the hard work you put in for your students, especially our students. I am in the Rising Scholars Program, so all of my students are incarcerated and are primarily people of color. And do you have any data or any advice in terms of really breaking down those institutional barriers, especially in the carceral system? It is extremely difficult to work within that system and to help the students redefine who they are and giving them that hope.
You know what? I've been doing some work around dual enrollment and Rising Scholars. I know Hartnell is that's part of the opportunities that are provided to students. I think this sense of belonging will really require peer-to-peer to support. So if there's any way to really build that, whether it be in the assignments where students are required to work together, just because there's limited interaction. So how do you create that culture within the group at the institution possibly could have a protective factor?
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura, if you don't mind going to the next slide, and then I'll answer John's question too. I'll add my part. I echo what Dr. Purnell said as well, but I think the underlying issue, I would highly encourage programs like that to take a look at Robin DiAngelo's work, White Fragility. The Niceness of Whiteness really does talk about these very things, because when do people get a second chance? When do people get the benefit of their full humanity, even though that they've made mistakes, right? The kintsugi, right? Yeah, they broke down, but this is the place of the comeback, right? We love the underdog. We love the David story, right? Even though he wasn't technically an underdog, but we love those ideologies. But to really get to the root of the cause, we have to talk about this ideal for humanity. Because what happens is, even though you're in a system, you pay for that even 100 years after. You never fully recover, even though we said we're going to reintegrate you into society. And we know that the community college system, when someone makes a mistake, that's where they come to school, right? And then oftentimes the students and the faculty are afraid, right? When you do your NBITA training and all those things, like, oh, well, are they going to cause a problem? Like, when do we actually give that care and forgiveness to folks who need that, that second chance? The other thing I would really highly recommend is figuring out a way to have a multidisciplinary team, so that one, the counselors are working with the faculty closely with students who have some challenges. Hey, it's almost like, a rap team when someone has had like a 5150 or they had some mental health challenges along the way. Hey, our students coming back, they have a right to come to our school. How can we make sure we center their belonging? And how do we work through our own ideologies and biases around people who have a record, right? So I think that's really the crux. It is rooted in racism. We know who's penalized in the carceral system. And I think this work really does highlight what happens when we're in this particular system. People, you can't wish racism away and you can't turn your head. Those two things don't make it different. You can't center tears when you've caused crime, right? There's a debt owed to students, and that's a part of it. So they're actually paying two debts. They're paying the debt because clearly they weren't worthy of being rescued in the educational system, and the carceral system just beat them down even further. So like I said, that's probably another lunch and learn session, but it's a really good question. But to answer it, I think I would definitely recommend, Robin DiAngelo's work, who really does talk about some of these things in more depth. Any other questions before I move on? I'm gonna keep you guys for a couple hours.
Yeah, we do have some questions in the chat, but
okay.
So I think we just
let's go. Let's take a few more and then I can move on.
Great. Okay. So in the chat, Brandon asked the question. As a white male of privilege, how could I address this topic with students of color without seeming like part of the problem or disingenuous. I have the best intentions, but I do know that I've been trained within that same problematic system.
That's an excellent question. I think the best way to do it is, and this is all my opinion, and what I believe is acknowledging it. You're already heading towards the right direction. Like, you can't pick your gender that you're assigned to. I mean, you can't pick those things. Hey, I'm a white male. That's just who I am. Nonetheless, I want to partner in the suffering. I want to understand how you see the world and how you walk through the world, right? Even though you have privilege, you can use it as being a co-conspirator. And I'll share a brief story. Many people have heard of Richard Nixon, right? I think I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. There's always the other side of the story of Richard Nixon. Most people don't know that he went to Dr. King's house after the assassination, and he sat at the bed of Coretta Scott King. Dr. King was not a Nixon fan. Clearly, they didn't get along politically. Even in his privilege, he was able to put that to the side. Do you know what he did that night? He brought Coretta Scott King a check, and it was large enough to pay for all 4 of their children's college education. And oftentimes people think he's only creating harm, but in the midst of that tragedy, he saw their humanity. And those are things, I think that's an excellent example of when the media controls a narrative, you don't really understand that Nixon would do something like that. You're like, wow, right? That's the other part of the story. So oftentimes when you're white working with Black students, you don't have to be Black to work with Black children or love them. What you do is when you see something wrong, you speak up and speak out, because oftentimes your privilege is going to get people to think differently because you're setting an example. You're modeling what it's like. Hey, I don't have all the answers, but this isn't sitting right. That's that critical consciousness and that care and gratitude that you have for your students. So I think that was an excellent question. I hope there was something that you can glean from that as you continue on your journey.
Yes, and I would say yes, yes, yes to what Dr. Hill has shared. I also want to note that the students, it didn't matter race or color when they talked about the faculty that had helped them. And I think back to the RP group's work on the 6 success factors, and one of them being being nurtured, and not in the babying sense, but knowing that someone wants and expects you to be successful was huge, right? And so when students talked about a faculty member, they often talked about, they let me know that they wanted me to be successful by pulling me aside and saying, I want you to take the 1 unit lab because I see you struggling with this, or come to my office hours. I want to help you with this piece because I think this is going to help you do better in the rest of the course. So to the point of, as you mentioned, Dr. Hill, just pointing out if there's bias in the class and being sensitive to that and how it impacts students, but also letting students know over and over again that you expect them to be successful. So you don't start the class with everybody in here, well, 50% of you are going to be gone by midterm. That doesn't suggest to me that you want students to be successful. So please check out the work that the RP group has done on the 6 success factors, because I really think it speaks to some examples that could be helpful.
And if it's okay with both of you, there's another question that's very relevant to that line of thought. Ronza asks, sometimes I have only one African-American student in my class who I can tell feels isolated and doesn't belong in the class, or feels isolated and not belonging in the class. What can I do more to support the student?
That's a great question. I remember having that experience personally too. In college, I was in a lecture hall with about 500 people, and I was the only person of color in the room. So I do know what that feels like. The best thing to do is, I think, one, there's a individual meeting, maybe meeting with that student, acknowledging it. Hey, I know this might be comfortable. How can I help you? Like, what makes you feel like you're being valued and you belong in my course? Is there anything I can do, right? I can't change who enrolled. I can't control that, right? Control the controllables, right? It's just like kind of coaching. What can I do to make you feel centered? Is there anything that I could do to be of a support to you? And on the next slide, I think the bigger challenge too, I just was recently involved in a youth conference, and the youth were teaching us about equity. And a student said, I was afraid to keep asking questions because I thought the teacher would minimize my intelligence. And that just kind of like, oh my gosh. So even asking questions, there's a stereotype threat. You know, we know that Steele does a lot of work around that. Like, am I, I have this own internal battle that I'm dealing with. It's a W.B. Du Bois called it double consciousness. So is there something going on? If I ask questions, they're going to feel like I don't belong here because I don't know if that's something that is normal in that class. And I know teachers would say, you know what, this is, no question's a dumb question, right? That's a self-determination theory or a culturally empathic motivation, finding student motivation. Hey, it's okay to ask questions. What is your comfort level? How do I get to know you, right? Beyond just your student number and the assignments that you turn in would be definitely something I would do. Also, I would underscore here, making sure the cultural bias, that kind of thing is important, because sometimes students will shut down if they feel like the questions are minimizing their intelligence or they shouldn't belong in the course. I think Dr. Purnell said, you don't belong. Are you in the right course because it's calculus? Right? Those are definitely things that are kind of microaggressions, right? Sometimes people don't know that that is a microaggression, or like, oh, you got to be like, it's unheard of a person of color to get a good grade. Like, those are things that we have to watch in our behavior. Even sometimes our fun biases and fun things that we say, like I share with people, the #1 selling shirt in Boston is a Yankees sucks shirt, and you give it to a little baby. It's a bias, it's fun in sports, but look at how we could turn that into something even bigger. So we just have to be really mindful, because the language hides a crime. So we have to be careful with the words that we use when we're centering, all students, but specifically the Black students in your class in that particular case. Sorry, that was long-winded, but I'll
No, and just quickly, I would add what students also talked about, some work we did at a college around this very issue. And students said, I don't want to be tokenized either, where like there's a topic where, oh, you as the Black person should know the answer or tell us about the Black experience. So yeah, just, or if other students will do that to another student to kind of call it out, but to address that in a way that lets that student know they don't have to be the representative for all Black people.
Absolutely.
Great. So those are all the questions in the chat for now, but a lot of appreciation for your comments. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So now back in the presenter mode. I was in conversation. I felt good to do the conversation. But again, I think the questions did hit a lot of these things here. I think defining the process for reporting racism and bias with the consequences, because oftentimes that's a big thing that kind of, that's under that, iceberg of culture, right? The Titanic didn't get sunk by what they saw on top. It was underneath the surface that got the boat to fall, right? So this is definitely something that we have to take serious. We have to be really serious about that in our courses when that's happening, right? Because oftentimes it's the same thing we do with pain. Black women go to doctors and like, oh, you're okay. I have family members who have been impacted by that and lost children because they felt like their pain threshold was higher because of their ethnicity. The same thing. So likewise with this reporting racism, we really do have to take it serious when students are bringing that concern. We might think, oh, you have to toughen up, right? Why do they have to toughen up all the time, right? It's exhausting being in that kind of position. On the next slide, we'll go a little bit deeper into providing some of the supports, and I'll give you all some recommendations and give you some minutes of your life back after I'm done speaking. A lot of it is to think about, there's non-academic challenges as well, right? So in student services, as you know, it goes beyond the four walls outside of the classroom, inside the classroom. So there's definitely an approach to meet with counselors on a regular basis. I think having a care model approach, an empathy model where you're going to be with that student for their 2 years until they're through the gate is definitely something I know with guided pathways and things like that. They're tied to specific degrees. If you're in business, I have a counselor that's in business, and you have your general counselor. And if you're ELPS, you have 3 people that are supporting you, depending on your structure at your particular campus. That holistic support will definitely help increase the transfer rate for students, because you're building trust and you're building relationship. Because I know we have, like, touch and go, and there's, okay, you can come and get your courses together, but it has to be a little bit deeper than that. So we can think about the impact, right? Because if their life is well, their academic performance will be well. And on the next slide, I go into some of the debt that was owed, right? We talked about the crisis, and we know that for every $10, an African American makes about 80 cents for every 10 white dollars that's made. So it's like 12 times the amount, right? We know that. And oftentimes we know that students of color have more debt than their white peers in terms of borrowing, right? They're borrowing debt and they're not completing, right? That creates a crisis. So they borrow money and they don't have the income to support it. So as we think about financial aid in the new climate, gainful employment is one of those things that's happening. So oftentimes we have to be sure that the degrees that students are studying will get them the amount of resources to help. The other thing that's so important and enlightening to me in terms of looking at this report, the students are actually their parents and their children's retirement. That's so important when you think about a first-gen student. They're actually going, if they're a parent student, they're going for their children, and they're going to take care of their parents because they want to pay them back. That's something that's embedded in the culture. So when I look at that, I'm like, they are literally the retirement for their parents. They have to transfer. That level of care and just that compassion that those students have when you meet them, if we thought about it that way, hey, what if that were my kid? If I can think about me being in the struggle, I would definitely want that additional support. So I leave you with that because that's so important. They are literally trying to get through that gate so that they can be the retirement for their parents and their own children. They want to be able to do their part. On the next slide, we kind of get into the data that Dr. Purnell's report. This just stuck out to me, 310%. I wanted to increase it because it's such an important number. When they pass that English and math the first year, they're going to transfer. If anything, we have to let the data guide our discussions. If we know that this is what the research is telling us, we have to really put our energy and our resources, in the classrooms. They have to have that love, joy, justice, and genius to get this data out in front of folks. The more people that know this, the more that they will take those courses seriously, right? And we can open up more sections. Hey, we have students, we know that, right? Do students who are first year, do they need a smaller course? Can I double roster? Can I open up another course to ensure that they get the support in this particular class? And the next slide we'll go into, and I'll wrap this up, determining the right fit. That is about creating that sense of belonging. And there's a great report that talks about the characteristics of being the right fit, the right college fit for our students. The location and distance, we know that the freeway therapy in the LA area can be detrimental to students finishing school just because of the amount, the dense population, size and community, academic structure, the campus culture. I do love Peter Drucker's work. He knows that culture will eat strategy for breakfast. It doesn't matter how smart you are, if you don't understand the culture, your ideas are not going to work. The culture is important, right? And the last thing, the support services. When we talk about that holistic support, how does that help the students accomplish their goals? It's not just a one-time check-in, it's a process, right? Care and determination, that's not a moment or a movement, it's a mindset. So our services have to have that mindset. And on the final couple slides here, as we advance the next one, these are just some of the recommendations, and I'll save you, I don't want you to die by PowerPoint. You guys can all read this stuff, but this is kind of really highlighting the combination of all the work and what the best college teachers do and the fantastic work from the RP group. But I do know that we have to have the structures to design the pathway as soon as the students get here until they leave, right? We have to make sure they have from day one, we have to be ready day one until graduation day. So from today to graduation day has to be the theme. We need to make sure the students have that love, care, and support as they're getting through their school and they're going through their journey and dealing with their challenges. Even if they're broken, remember the kintsugi, right? We can make their mess a masterpiece by putting that silver and gold in the cracks. We're not going to hide their damage, we're going to love them through that damage and show that this is a beautiful scar. It's okay. It shows you that you've been through something and you can pick yourself up. I believe that might be it for me in terms of the recommendations, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Purnell and Dr. Hill. That was incredible. I learn a lot every time I listen to you speak, and I feel inspired, especially after listening to you, and I feel like I'm not alone. We are at the top of the hour, and I do see some questions in the chat. James and I actually have to jump to another meeting, so if there are more questions and you want to add it to that Google document that I shared earlier, please feel free to.
And I'll just say in the chat, we've got a good discussion going on. We have addressed all the actual questions in the chat.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop recording.